Hi, I'm Murphy, and this is my channel, Murphy's Every Whim, where I talk about books just because it's fun and I love it. So it's afternoon and my partner is taking a shower right now, so hopefully that sound doesn't interfere with this. And I want to talk about doing some cleanup of books that I've only partially finished. So I've made a video, haven't edited it, and maybe it's out already. I don't know what order these will go out. But I made a video about the spreadsheet that I keep track of all the books that I've read, want to read, and own in it. And I like to clean up the spreadsheet sometimes, but you know, it has 3,500 lines in it, so trying to find a small piece that I feel like I can handle for a short bit of cleaning up is sometimes hard. So I found a subset that I liked, and that was the list of books I have on audible.com that are partially finished. And on audible.com it's called in progress, and in my spreadsheet it says partial. And so that ended up being about 60 books or so, and I thought that was a good chunk to be able to deal with and make some progress on cleaning up my spreadsheet and maybe figuring out whether I want to finish reading any of. So why would I step away from things? Sometimes I'm on a trip and get started on a book, but when I get home, it just feels like my life goes on and I forget that I had started a book, or maybe I started it and then my whim, my every whim, took me off in some other direction and I just forgot it. And I need some mechanism to keep the books I've partially read in mind somehow. For the books in this list, what happened was one of three things. Either I marked the book finished because I had finished it and I just hadn't gotten things up to date. So both in Audible and on my spreadsheet, I marked them complete. Or I reset the book back to the beginning in Audible and marked it as unfinished and got it to show up in the not started list. And if you want to know how to do that, maybe someday I'll talk about how I navigate and handle things in Audible, which is imperfect to say the least. So I reset them to the beginning as if I hadn't read them, and then in my spreadsheet I said that I hadn't read them. And that was because I really didn't remember enough of them to feel like I could start in the middle. And then finally, the ones that were left, I took some of them and added them to a Read Next collection in Audible, and I've been working my way through those. So, which books ended up making it into the I've read part of them, I feel like I can pick up and move on from there, and I should read next. And so, those are, first, The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell by Robert Dugoni. And in Audible, it had me in the middle of the book in terms of how much I had read. But I thought I had finished this book. And in my spreadsheet, it also said partial. So I decided to reread this book from the beginning. So I put it back to the beginning and put it in the Read Next list. And I've actually finished it since then. And yes, I had read the whole thing. And for the most part, it was worthwhile to read again. I should write about it sometime. A Body of Proof by Daryl Brown and Sophie Ellis. And this is an Audible original, which had multiple voices. There were interviews, and so it had different people in it, and it was a true crime story written in or performed in the form of a podcast, and I wondered if maybe it had been intended to be a podcast or was a podcast at one time. And I've finished it since I put it on this list, and meh. Born a Crime, Trevor Noah. This is his memoir about growing up in South Africa, and I say finished about half of it, and so I should get back into it. One thing about it is a little too episodic, and it goes a little forward and backward in time, and so I just feel like it doesn't have a story that ties it together. And for that reason, it's easy to forget to read it, more of it, to listen to more of it. Code Girls by Liza Mundy, and this is about World War II code breakers, and it's the sort of thing I like to read, but somehow I got started on it and forgot about it. So that one I just need to get back to. The Violent Bear It Away by Flannery O'Connor. I'm guessing I have read this on paper at some time, but maybe not. I think I've read a lot more of Flannery O'Connor's short works than her longer works, and so this is one that is not quite as interesting to me because it's about a young man's struggle to live with the burden of being a prophet. And I just remember stepping away from it, and I should get back to it. Transcription by Kate Atkinson, a World War II story. This is the first book that I have read of hers that is not part of the Jackson Brodie series, and really slow to get into. I've read since that it's based on some true stories about the fifth column. But I should get back into it. Slan by A.E. Van Vogt. And this is a classic 1940s, 1950s science fiction book. It was first serialized and then published as a book, and it's about a created race called the Slan who live on Earth with humans, and the Slan are smarter, stronger, and can speak telepathically, communicate telepathically. And so they're outcasts. And this one particular Slan, Jami, is trying to find out why, possibly bring the races together. Is a classic. It's one of those science fiction books that ends up being on a these are science fiction books you must read. Firefly, Big Damn Hero by James Lovegrove. I really enjoyed the Firefly series on TV, and according to what I've read, this is the first one of a series of novels that follow the group in Firefly, and started reading it. It sounds just like an episode, so it's fun as well. But again, just stepped away from it. Dutch Girl by Robert Matzen. And this is another World War II book. It's a biography about Audrey Hepburn, and when she lived in the Netherlands and actually worked with the Dutch resistance. And so I got started on this. And then finally, Dodge and Twist by Tony Lee. This is another Audible original. I have found that I don't particularly like Audible originals as much for various reasons. One is that they often have multiple voices, and when I make a video about my hearing, I'll talk about why that's a bad thing. But this is 12 years after Oliver Twist, when the Artful Dodger and Oliver get together and they're planning a heist. So, actually, of these books, I've finished about half of them. And so in a way, it's a good thing. I've cleared out some of the partial reads. I've reset some partial reads back to 0, and I updated those that had actually been finished but were still listed as partial. And so I felt good that of, 3,500 lines in my spreadsheet, 60 of them were now up to date to a certain extent. I talk about this in another video, but my spreadsheet is flawed, and a data science maxim is all data is flawed. Some data is useful. So as long as I'm finding this flawed data useful, it's okay that it's flawed. But I do like to update it periodically. And to do that, I really need small chunks like this. So I'm thinking about, if you see this bookshelf behind me, you'll see that there are bookmarks in various books, the ones you can see, and there are bookmarks in other books that you can't see. I have a very large collection of bookmarks, and my next plan is to go through the bookshelf, find all the books that are partially read, and do the same thing. Either reset them to 0, put them on a read next list, or that I really finished them and I just left a bookmark in the middle for some bizarre reason. Maybe I was trying to remember that particular page, but of course I wouldn't remember why I wanted to remember that particular page. Anyway, so such is my reading at this time on a beautiful afternoon. The sun has finally come out, and I will see you next time. Take care of yourself.